What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall markets. I'm going to break down some important things that President Trump just said that are going to be changing policies, which could cause a big move in the stock market. I'm going to break down what's going on with the economic calendar moving forward and what you should be watching for as time goes on. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you sign up for Moomoo with the link down below and deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000, you're guaranteed 25 in total. And deposit $5,000, you're guaranteed 60 free stocks. You also qualify for an 8.1% APY in uninvested cash, and the offer ends very soon as June 3rd. Anyways, as far as the market's going, guys, today is Memorial Day, so I wish you all a very happy Memorial Day. The market's closed for today, at least for equities and the bonds markets, but we are seeing futures moving. They're actually up a bit right now, especially after some big news that came out involving President Trump. This signifies the market may see a bounce tomorrow, but whether or not the bounce lasts is going to depend on what President Trump ends up saying and any policy changes. So I'll give you guys an update on the policies. I'll talk about what President Trump just said. Then I'll break down more details about these charts. Just know for now, SPY is going to be testing our 580.12 area at the 50 EMA right over here, the yellow line you're seeing. And if we break this, we could attempt to get closer to fill this imbalance to push into the mid 580s if we do get some kind of bullish move. Once again, I'll go over all the contingencies, but let's first talk about President Trump. So there's been a very, very big update that came out. President Trump announced that he's going to be extending the deadline for the 50% tariffs on the European Union until July 9th. So before, he was saying that the deadline was going to be on June 1st, but now he's saying July 9th because it's going to give them more time to negotiate. And that's some very, very big news. So this is President Trump's official Truth Social post right over here. He mentioned that he received a very important call from the president of the European Commission requesting an extension on the June 1st deadline on the 50% tariff with respect to trade and the European Union. He agreed to the extension for July 9th, 2025, and it was his privilege to do so. So he basically has been doing this. One of the things I mentioned to you all is that when President Trump threatened to increase the tariffs on the European Union to 50%, with the deadline being June 1st, he did this as a negotiation tactic, and that's what President Trump is known for doing. Now, he's gotten lots of criticism from Warren Buffett and many other figures about how, using tariffs is not the best way of doing things. I completely understand that, and I understand people's frustrations about this, but you have to understand that's his tactic. This is how he's doing things, and that there is an intention behind these tweets, these claims, and everything that's going on. So when he said that, he got the European Commission to call him, forge a deal, and they came to an agreement to extend the deadline, and now they have more time to negotiate with what is necessary. We actually saw this right over here. This is what the European Commission said. She said it's a good call from the President of the United States. The EU and US share the world's most consequential and close trade relationship. Europe is ready to advance talks swiftly and decisively, and to reach a good deal, we would need the time until July 9th. So that's great news. If anything, for both sides, this is what President Trump wanted. He wanted to see the Europeans come up with a great deal. He mentioned before he wasn't happy with the progress that was being made. He was saying he doesn't need a deal if they're going to negotiate this way. They're screwing over the US. He kept saying that before because he really got their attention, and now they managed to come to a consensus. So let's hope that we get a good deal with the Europeans, we get a good deal with the European Commission, and that something good comes out of this. I have hope for that. For the time being, the tariffs have been delayed, and this is some bullish news for the markets, at least to start things off. Secondly, President Trump did put this on his Truth Social page. He said that countries from all over the world want to see and make trade deals with us. It is a beautiful thing to see. The good old USA will soon have tremendous growth and be stronger than ever before. That's another good quote that came out from President Trump today. He's saying that countries want trade deals. They're negotiating very nicely. There was lots of talks about how India and Japan could have deals very soon. India especially is very close from what I heard from Lutnick and many other important officials. That is some big news as well. On top of this, President Trump did make this announcement about the deal between the U.S. and Japanese steel companies. That's some great news that's come out, at least so far. So we have Nippon Steel and U.S. Steel once again planning a partnership. He's saying this is going to create 70,000 jobs. Not saying he's right or wrong about that. I'm just saying that this is what he claims. And obviously the market's going to respond. And he's saying it's going to be adding $14 billion to the U.S. economy. Once again, this is what he is claiming. I'm not saying he's right or wrong. This is just what he's saying. But that's big news, at least as well. And that could be a little bit more positive for the markets, at least to some extent. Now, when it comes to other pieces of news, we had Jerome Powell giving a speech, and he basically said that we're in a new strategy for the world where we see very low rates, and they're not really sure about if they're going to like get them soon. But he's basically saying that rates are going to remain high, but they're going to need a new strategy to get them lower. And that we're in a new environment where there's a lot of uncertainty about getting rates to the lower ends. He said that the Fed has to continue to assess the current situation, and he didn't really say way too much about that. He just said that they need a new strategy to do that. There's a new strategy coming for a world of low rates. So that's what we heard from Jerome Powell, at least so far. He was very ambiguous, saying the same things over and over again. He didn't really tell us anything new. So that's what we heard from him, at least on his speech yesterday. And besides that, tomorrow is going to be Tuesday, May 27th. Tomorrow morning, we have Cash Kari giving a speech from the Fed. And then after that, we have, just to double check, some housing data in the morning. It's all very minor. Then at 10 a.m., that's when things get serious, since we have consumer confidence at 10 a.m. And at 10:30 a.m., we have the Dallas Fed Manufacturing Index. So expect some volatility once all this data is out. Last but not least, the fear and greed index is currently at greed. That's making up the majority of sentiments. This might become a little bit more greedy if the market continues to bounce. The fear and greed index is currently at extreme fear. This might actually bounce as we're seeing the S&P 500 testing this orange line right here, which is actually our 125 daily moving average. So that could be a good sign for us right over here if some buyers do try to defend. And then if you look at the put to call option ratio, we're seeing fear subsiding a little bit, and we're seeing this actually climbing a little bit more, right? And this is going to become a little bit less fearful as some buyers step in. The VIX is also bouncing, but we're going to see if this gets a rejection or not. So the way I want to go about this is that it's also worth mentioning that for certain stocks in particular, such as like Aapl, okay, things are not as great for them because we did see many of their suppliers' shares drop this morning, especially in China. We saw like LensTech and Lux share end up seeing their share prices dropping as a result of the trade war against Apple. Excuse me. So what's happening is Apple and Samsung, they are being threatened with higher tariffs by President Trump. But if they produce in the US, he's saying that he won't be doing that. They'll be free from the tariffs. He's trying to incentivize them to do that. But keep in mind that that's what we're essentially looking for, at least thus far. Now, I just want to say that with what's going on, you know, we're not 100% sure about how that's going to change it. We're still waiting for an update from President Trump, but that's what we have so far. So those threats on Apple still remain. So it's not the best for them in particular. But in all honesty, here's what's going to likely happen heading into tomorrow. So let's just say that, you know, the European tariffs are delayed, and there's nothing like too bad that comes out. If we just get good news, I do anticipate some kind of rebound move, at least temporarily, for SPY to get back up to this resistance. And then we'll see what kind of reaction we get from there. If we're bearish, let's just say we get another bad piece of news involving tariffs or something else happens, there could be a potential rejection coming near this 20 EMA right here. So that could actually take us right back down. But if we're bullish, and if we continue to rocket, and let's just say the tariff news subsides, there's no bad news, we could try to get back up towards like the 588s to 590 area. So it is possible to see a full-on rebound if we get good news after good news and we don't get any bad news after that. So what's going to happen tomorrow? Here's what I think is going to likely happen. I do anticipate some upside. I think that as of right now, as long as there's no more bad news, just for the time being, we're looking for attempts to get back up to this imbalance. And I think that that's going to take us towards like 584. But that's going to be very, very dependent. Once we get this rebound, if we get bad news, we could still get a big rejection back down. And if we don't get bad news, we could be looking for a big rebound. So it all depends on what President Trump says. But as of right now, at the time I'm recording this, I'm getting lots of good news from the president involving trade negotiations about what's happening with the European policies. So we're favoring an attempt to go higher just for the time being. This could just be a very temporary move because, you know, we still haven't filled this gap here. So I'm not sure if we're going to come down to fill that gap. We already got some nice downside on Friday coming down to 573. So we should be looking for a temporary rebound, and we'll see if this becomes a bigger one or if we get a big rejection. So I'll be watching that very closely. But for now, just look for a small rebound at least tomorrow just to start things off into the mid 580s, and we'll see how it goes from there. On the QQQ, it's the same thing essentially. So what's going on is you want to see if we could hold 507. If that fails us, we're looking for a dip to 504. If this holds, we're looking for an attempt to push for 512 to about 513.21. This is where the 20 EMA happens to be. If that breaks, we're looking for a bigger push to 517. But if it doesn't break 513, we're looking for a big rejection back down to 507. So if we don't hold 507, I do anticipate us to retest this low. But if we hold above like 510, we're looking for an attempt to retest this high. I anticipate that this 504 area is holding. We're making higher lows here, and we're trying to push back up to about 513 to 515, right back up here. Then we'll see if we get a rejection back down to go lower or not. So I'll be watching that very closely, or if we continue to go higher. So the most probable move for tomorrow would be, as long as there's no new bad news, right? As long as the news we have today holds about how the European tariffs are delayed, about how there's a big deal between the US steel and Japanese steel, that should actually help us rebound a bit. And I could be looking for an attempt to get up to like 513 or so. And then I'll be watching to see, do we get a big rejection off that or do we continue to climb? It all depends on the news. But for now, anticipate some kind of upside move as the bias for tomorrow, the most likely possibility. As long as we don't see the QQQ lose 507, we should be trying to continue to go up to like 513 to 512. Then we'll see how it goes from there. For the IWM Russell 2000, we're looking a little bit more bullish. Now, that's just a temporary claim, right? As you can tell, we're making like lower highs for the shorter term, but we could attempt to retest these EMAs towards 204 to 205. I do anticipate that. To be really bullish, you want to hold above 205 or closer to start pushing more. And to be bearish, you want to see a big rejection, a loss below 200 to start dipping back down. So what I anticipate is that as we are trying to rebound right here, we're trying to hold above 200. We're looking for an attempt to push to about 204 or above. So right back up here. And then we'll see if we continue or not. If not, we could be turning back down from there, but we still look bullish at least nonetheless. For ES, we're looking a bit more bullish. We have a nice looking inverse head and shoulders setup. We need to hold above 58.50. As long as we're above that, we're technically favoring. We're going to try to go up for the 5900s, and I do think the odds favor that. So I'm watching this resistance right here. This is previous support becoming resistance at 5,900. And then our next level is going to be right over here, which is where we have this resistance over here around 5,925. So I do anticipate 5,900 to 5,925 to be tested, but this could just be a temporary move because we could still come back down if we get another bad piece of news or if something happens. For now, we're favoring a test of 5,900 or a little bit above that for the time being heading into tomorrow. I do think that's very, very likely given the news we currently have. So watch for this setup for us to see some kind of rebound. This could also be like a left shoulder head, maybe like a right shoulder before we bounce. That could be like an attempt to make a full recovery, but it depends on the news. Like, do we continue to hold above 5,900? Do we get another rejection down? It depends. For now, I do think that we try to climb higher, so I'm looking for an attempt for 5,900 to 5,925 on ES heading into tomorrow. So look for some upside, at least for the time being. Same thing with NQ, we're trying to bounce now. So if we lose 21,000, we're looking for a bigger dump to below 21,000. But because President Trump is saying that the tariffs have been delayed, I do think this could be pushing for 21,400 right up to this resistance over here. But whether or not this lasts depends on these factors. Will we break 21,500 to continue, or do we hit 21,400 and reject? I'm not 100% sure about that. I have to see it in real time and see what President Trump says. But for now, we are still anticipating this upside move for 21,400 on NQ. For Bitcoin, we're making higher highs and higher lows. We have dipped a bit because we were due for that, at least technically. But now we have to see if we could hold 107,000. 107,750 is our main support alongside 108,000. And we'll see if we bounce off this to try to continue to climb towards 110,000 plus. Might see a small dip before we try to rebound, so just keep that in mind. As far as Tesla goes, we're looking pretty good right now. We're trying to rebound. We do have a very, very nice looking flag setup, but I do anticipate a lot of upside approaching the big event for Tesla when they start launching the robotaxis in Texas. Keep in mind, guys, I'm not extremely bullish the entire time, though. I do think that we'll have to see if we get the breakout now or later on. It all depends on if we could break out of this resistance around the 340s. I do think we could push approaching the big launch of the robotaxi in Texas, but it's going to be like a buy the rumor, sell the news event. If we get a massive run approaching it, then there could be a big rejection afterwards, after they officially launched their robo taxis, and we're looking for a big rejection as well. That's like really far into the future, though, many weeks out. So I will talk more about that later on. But we're looking to see if Tesla gets this breakdown. Maybe it's by the time we get to June. As of right now, we're still range bound, so it might be range bound for some time until we break 345 to push back up to these highs. So it's a bullish setup. We may consolidate for some time in this range like we've been doing for the last couple of days before we get some kind of breakout into the future. Looking at Nvda, I just want to say we're range bound right now. So we have resistance at 132, and this support right here is at 128. I could be looking for a retest of this high, maybe a continuation like this before this attempts to break. On Wednesday, they have earnings, so that could also cause a very, very big move if they get some kind of breakout or not. I think that's going to be a market changing event, so get ready for that. For tomorrow, we also have Aapl, which is still weak here, but it depends. Can we base at this low? Can we hold 193.5? If we don't hold 193.5, we could be dipping all the way down towards this low here around 190. But if we do hold it, we could be looking for a rebound. I do think that we might see a little consolidation move down here for some time. So what I anticipate is that we might see a lot of sideways price action before we see some kind of attempt to bounce for 198. So keep that in mind. Looking at Netflix, it's a little bit weak here. It's been forming a dip, but this is also forming some sort of like flag. So if you look at this like this, we're forming a flag on Netflix, and this could just be a temporary decline. Depending on how you want to look at this, we could be respecting this channel for some time before we get some kind of break again. So I wouldn't be too surprised if Netflix continues to do something like that, where we just, respect this flag for a little longer before this attempts to see another breakout above the 1200s. So that's what I'm anticipating, at least for the time being. For MSTR, we're looking weak. I do think we might dip a little bit more to retest 354. We might be retesting this 200 EMA and the support right here. And then we'll be looking to see if we get a big bounce after that. Can we bounce back up towards the 380 area? I'll be watching to see if 354 holds to get that bounce. So I still anticipate some downside until we get some kind of bounce attempt. Celsius needs to hold 34.9. As long as that holds, we're looking for an attempt to get back up to 37. So keep that in mind as we have a double bottom. 37 is also very possible. For Supermicro, we're making lower highs right here, so keep that in mind. We have to see if 40 holds. If it holds, we're looking for an attempt to get back up to 41. If not, we could be dipping lower. So watch and see if 39 holds as we consolidate. If we hold this, we're looking for a big rebound for 41. So keep that in mind as we have like a triple bottom here. So watch and see if we get a bounce back up to 41. For Palantir, we have a triple bottom here. We need to see if we could hold above 123. As long as we don't lose 122, we could try to make a higher low before we start pushing for 127. We have a triple bottom here, and we'll see if we end up getting a big bounce back up towards 125. So I'll be watching that very closely. Rivian looks to me like it's going to be consolidating. We're going to test 15.26, bounce to 15.88, trade sideways until we start to see an attempt to bounce again. I'll be watching that very closely, at least for now. SoFi is also consolidating. We're stuck between 13.25 and 12.84 is our support and resistance, basically. We're going back and forth like this, and we'll see if we end eventually get a bounce upwards, if we get a break. So we're just waiting to see if that ends up happening. AMD is going to likely be testing 111, so we'll see if we break through that or not. The news that came out could also help us, especially since we're seeing some news that CalPERS just made a big investment into them. So we're looking for an attempt for 111 plus. I'll be watching that very closely. For ARM, I want to see if we could break past 129 to push more. If not, we could be dipping more. I am anticipating some upside for 129 at least, nonetheless. PayPal needs to hold 69. As long as we're above 69, we're favoring a bounce for 70.7. Coinbase is making lower highs here. It's a little bit weak for the time being. We need to see this form a base around here. I need to see this base around 256. If we form that base, then this could consolidate and try to bounce. So I need to see this hold support at least for the time being. For Amazon, we're making lower highs here. We need to see if we get back above 202 to rebound. If we hold above 202 tomorrow, I do anticipate it's going to try to bounce a little bit. If not, we have to see 196 hold. So we're stuck between 196 and basically 200 as our range. I'm thinking we might see a move like this where we consolidate for some time. Maybe we can try to bounce if we could hold 196. If we don't hold this, we still have a gap to fill, so please be very careful. On Meta, we're still kind of weak here. We still have kind of like an inverse cup and handle. We need to hold 625. If we don't, we could dip a little bit more for like 618 or so. And then we need to bounce from here, get back above 633 to rebound. If we don't hold 620, we're looking for this gap fill blow, but so it might see a small dip before it tries to bounce. On Google, we're also getting a big rejection right over here. We have to see if 169 holds. If not, we could be dipping back down to 166. So look for a little bit more downside before we see some buyers defend. I could be looking for like 168 or below, and we'll see if we end up getting that bounce. On Microsoft, we're making lower highs right here. We need to hold above 452. If not, we could be dipping towards like 446 to 448 in that range. We'll see if buyers defend. So look for some downside just to be safe. On DJT, we got a nice rebound in the after hours, looking for an attempt to push back up to 26.5. There's upside potential. The VIX has a tough resistance at 23.4. So we'll see if we kind of pop here and then dip back down to about 20.5. And we'll see what kind of reaction we get as we're still range bound. The 10-year is kind of flat right here, and so is the dollar index. Not really doing a whole lot. It's technically bearish. This is a bullish sign for the markets. So what's my view? I believe that temporarily the market's going to see a rebound tomorrow, given the news we currently have. But I'm using the word temporarily because this is not going to be a forever thing. At least it's not guaranteed to be a forever thing. We might see a temporary move up, and then we'll see, do we continue to go higher? Or are we just going to see a big rebound and a rejection afterwards if we get more bad news from President Trump about the tariffs or something else happens? It all depends. So I do anticipate a temporary push, and we'll see what happens from there. Do we continue or do we get a rejection? Get ready for some upside tomorrow for a bounce, but then we'll have to see what happens with the news after that. For now, given the news we have, we're looking a bit more bullish. So I do anticipate some upside once we approach resistance, and we'll see what happens from there. Don't forget, tomorrow we're going to see some high volatility once we get our consumer confidence and manufacturing numbers at 10 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. So get ready, guys. We'll see what happens with the news. And I thank you all so much for listening. Enjoy the rest of your Memorial Day, and peace out.